Hello, my name is Father Lucio Boccacci, and I am the author of the Boy Jesus series. And I wanted to present to you how the series came about. It's a whole series based on one simple idea: the boy Jesus. Who is he, and what did he go through in the second chapter of Luke, verses 40 to 52? But let's go back to the beginning of how I felt inspired to write these series. When I was in high school, I went through a bit of a conversion, and my faith became a lot more real to me. I read several books in my high school years and college years. One of the books was actually on the boy Jesus. Unbeknownst to me, this was already becoming real in my life. This is St. Elreda of Rievaulx's book on Jesus at 12 years old. It's actually not even a book. It's a treatise from the Middle Ages, and he was writing to a friend or relative on this passage in the Gospel of Luke. His friend was asking him what this was all about, and so he wrote quite a lengthy letter all about it. And it's really one of the few things we have in history that just dedicates itself to this passage in the Gospel of Luke, and for whatever reason, I came across it. Of course, back then in high school, I was not aware of this particular calling to write on this theme, but it was already there, and it's amazing that it was already there. Then later on, I felt called to the priesthood, and I went to the seminary. During my first few years of seminary, something interesting happened. There was a priest who had written a book on the boy Jesus. This was a fiction book. A series of boys have a dream about the boy Jesus, and each chapter is about 5 minutes, so it's called 5 Minutes with the child Jesus. And this one's in English, so he was asking for volunteers to actually translate from the Spanish to the English. And I volunteered. I don't know why I volunteered, I just did. And I ended up writing one of the chapters. So I look at that as another step in this direction of writing this series, almost like another seed being planted. Of course, back then, I had no idea I would be doing this. An idea came to mind. An internship is a period of time between studies and before being ordained to the priesthood that is all about getting some real-world practice. And so I was a seminarian, and I was practicing doing what a priest does, except for the sacraments, of course. In any case, during those years, I began to learn a lot about youth ministry, and I dedicated myself to youth ministry and to working at a school. In my last year, I was in Chicago, and it just dawned on me, why don't we present the young Jesus to our young people in the church? We learn a lot about youth ministry, techniques, games, programs. You can read about adolescent psychology to try to reach them better, understand them better. But what about Jesus? We always present him as already an adult. What about when he was 12? What about when he was an adolescent himself? What about when he was a young man? What is there to say about that? And how could that possibly inspire a young person today? So that idea was going around in my head, and I didn't know how to answer it until later. And that later happened when I was studying theology. I was blessed to go study theology in Rome. And in my first year, we had our Gospels class, and we were asked to write a short commentary on a section of the Gospels. And obviously, I chose this passage. I thought, well, this will be a great opportunity to go deeper into this passage. That passage was the finding of the boy Jesus in the temple, Luke chapter 2, verses 40 to 52. And what I found was something really impressive. It was just, there was a whole treasure of work put into this by scholars throughout the ages, and especially the last 200 years. Way more than I could possibly write in 5 pages. So I did what I could in 5 pages, but I had read up a lot on this particular passage, and I became really enthralled by it. It was just amazing. Then came time to write a thesis for my bachelor's degree in theology. And I said, well, let's do it. Let's just focus on this. Let's do a scriptural commentary on the passage of the finding of the boy Jesus in the temple. So I dedicated a lot of time to researching this, reading all the possible scholarly works that comment on the Gospel of Luke, on the Scriptures, first century Israel, etc., including St. Aelred as one of my sources as well. And I ended up writing a 30-page thesis on this. It was on the Christological aspects of this particular passage, so I was trying to narrow it down because there's so much. But I could have written much more than 30 pages. And so then I really felt called to write an actual book for lay people on this theme, just presenting to them the richness that I have found in this passage. It ended up being a very, very thick book. And so I became a little bit discouraged, thinking, no one's going to read this. And I was holding this book in my hand, just kind of going through it and praying about it. And it just dawned on me, why don't I just do like the TV series? They have various episodes, and it's all part of the same series. So instead of doing one long movie, I just write a bunch of small books on it. And so I broke up the book into smaller books and made it into a series, and hence the Boy Jesus series. Back then, it was called the Father's Adolescent series. I thought it was kind of a catchy way of talking about the adolescence of Jesus, and he is obviously his father's son. But, when you look online about the father's adolescent, what you end up getting is a bunch of adolescent psychology, so it wasn't really working well. So I changed the title to the Boy Jesus series, and when you look for that online, you get exactly what you're looking for. I would like to tell you a little bit about the book itself. Again, I'm going deeper into the finding of the boy Jesus in the temple. There's a lot there. It may seem like there's not. How could there be? There's only 13 verses. But trust me, get the series and you'll see for yourself. Who's the audience? Many people think that this is for middle school, high school kids. It's actually not. It's for adults. I've written it with adults in mind. Now, I have a program that simplifies my writing to more of a high school level. So the content is still good content, but the English is simplified. So somebody in high school should be able to read it just fine. However, for now, it's intended for adults. Now, keep in mind also that I'm focusing primarily on the scriptures and also what we can know about Israel in the first century. I'm not taking anything from the mystics or the saints of past who have had certain visions, for example, of the Holy Family and what Jesus was like when he was young. That's not what I'm doing. That may be valid, but I have not included any material from that in these books. I'm trying to keep it as scriptural as possible and as non-fiction as possible. And that's the next part. This is not a fictional writing of the finding of the boy Jesus in the temple. There are other books that relate a story, and they fill in the gaps, and therefore they're fiction, but they're based on the passage in the scripture and on history. But that's not what I'm doing. I am filling in the gaps with converging and convincing arguments, and I create a timeline and a narrative based on the scriptures and based on what we know about Israel during that time that is convincing and that all converges upon one narrative. But it's not told as a story. It's more of a nonfiction commentary on the narrative in Luke's gospel. It's very unique. You're not going to find something like this out there, at least today in 2023 as the filming of this project. It may be in the future, but as of now, this is all you will find written for the average Christian on this theme. So I'm very excited about the project. I think you will be as well. And you can find this online. So I highly encourage you to purchase the series and read for yourself just the many treasures of the scriptures and the Lord wanted us to know about his youthful years.